Through most of my filmmaking career, there's always been this one camera I've dreamed of owning. There's a lot of talk in the community centered around the question, does the perfect camera exist? I'll go ahead and beat the dead horse in saying no, but you can get really close, and for my personal style of filmmaking, this is the closest thing I've been able to find, but it's always been out of reach for me. That was until I realized there's been one buried in the backyard this whole time. This is Eleanor. She's my favorite camera of all time. And yeah, she's a Blackmagic URSA Mini Pro 4.6K G2. This is my ideal camera for 5 reasons, so let's take a stroll through each. A decade ago, Blackmagic broke ground with the original URSA, an early consumer digital film camera I would absolutely love to play with someday. It's kind of a chunky dude, and has this gigantic screen on the side that I would happily play Mountain Blade on. Blackmagic's reputation was a bit more scrappy back then. It seemed like there was enough missed deadlines and quality control issues to negatively affect public opinion, so Blackmagic's strategy became that of refinement. With each generation, the URSA became not only more solid and reliable, but more versatile and powerful, which is a story arc we're still currently in with the upcoming URSA Cine 12K and the 17K models that look to trade blows with the highest-end cinema cameras in the world. When the 4.6K G2 was first announced, I was a part of a production team that bought several of them, and coming from mirrorless cameras, this was my first time ever using a real cinema body, and I immediately fell in love, and the first biggest reason why is the I/O selection. URSA users enjoy the full gamut of professional ins and outs in this camera body. There's a whole bunch of BNC connections that equate to one 12G SDI in, two 12G SDI outs, plus a reference and timecode in. There's USB-C for SSD recording, 4-pin power in, 4-pin power out, D-tap out with the V-mount plate, 3.5mm out, 2 full-size XLRs, 2.5mm LANC, 2 SD card slots, and 2 CFast 2.0 slots. You can show up to almost any job and never worry about having the right port for something. Placement of everything makes sense, and everything feels tight and simple. With a battery plate and a rear-mounted V-mount battery, I never have anything dangling or rattling. It's all rock solid. Oh, and real quick, we can talk about how I like to rig Eleanor up. Like I said, I use V-mount batteries. I'll use a 90-ish watt-hour for balance, usually if I'm hand-holding the camera, but if it's on sticks, I'm using Caleb Pike and Small Rig's 212 watt-hour V-mount. I can get a ridiculous amount of battery life on this thing, the ports are incredible, the build quality's solid, and I actually have found a lot of use out of the live wattage reading on the back. On top, I always like to have a top handle, and for this I actually chose a Tilt-A-handle that's designed for the Sony FX6. It works great, feels great, balance is good, it isn't terribly expensive, and it has a 15mm rod clamp built in, which I use to thread a short rod through and a small rig shotgun mic mount. Once that's barely off to the side and out of the way, I tighten everything down, slap an MKE600 in there, connect everything with an angled Condor Blue XLR cable, and Eleanor's your uncle. Sometimes I'll throw a monitor on there, which these days is the excellent Portkeys HS8. It's huge, bright, really well built, and has a dummy battery on the back for wireless transmission if I ever need it. Most of the time, I'm just running the rig like this though. It's tight, efficient, and comfortable, which is actually the second reason I love this camera, the ergonomics. This is an area where the URSA has a clear advantage over basically every camera on the market for me. I'm not a huge fan of IBIS or digital stabilization, and I usually will try to avoid it if I can help it. The most natural handheld motion is only possible through holding a legitimately heavy camera with good balance. Eleanor is heavy enough to smooth out micro jitter, but light enough to hold for hours without any issues. Every operator is different, but this is the Goldilocks setup for me. I'm a big fan of the baby cradle if I need to go high, and the top handle for basically everything else. And unless I'm using a seriously tight lens, I'm always happy with how the footage looks in the end. Plus, rigging is insanely easy if I ever want to add more weight for any reason. I think the camera by itself is around 5 pounds, and mostly because this thing is entirely made of metal, which is reason number 3 for Eleanor's greatness. The build quality of the URSA line is what you want to find in a professional cinema camera. Throughout my career, I've probably logged over 1,000 hours of use with 6 different 4.6K G2s, and not a single one of them have had a single issue ever. The metal build makes me feel more confident in building a rig and adding peripherals. It makes me more confident in the camera itself holding up to abuse over the years, and confidence in your camera on set is always a good thing. Side note, the fans make a funny sound if you put an URSA down directly on top of a blade of grass. The fourth reason is a dumb one, but also one of the most important. Eleanor comes out of the box with internal NDs. It really isn't the end of the world to have to use screw-ons or a matte box, but once you get used to using internal NDs, it's so hard to go back to anything else. I also really like that the system isn't electronic, and instead it's this super satisfying physical wheel you can turn that will never break. The IR cutting in the NDs is pretty good. At some point I'll probably pony up and get the OLPF, but for now it isn't too much of a problem. The internal NDs just make me feel more confident and less stressed on set. Last but certainly not least is the image quality. Let me be annoying and brag on Eleanor for a second. This is a 4608 by 2592 Super 35 dual gain CMOS sensor developed by Fairchild. It's capable of full resolution 4.6K at up to 120 FPS in Blackmagic RAW or ProRes, and has world-class readout and dynamic range scores. The resolutions and frame rates aren't super important to me, but it's definitely cool to have them in there. I'm not complaining one bit. In case you're curious. What is super important to me are the codec options. Blackmagic RAW is what I'm using most of the time because the quality is unbelievable. Playback is almost as good as ProRes, and there are plenty of compression levels for whatever kind of file sizes I'm looking for. For most of the stuff I do that will end up online, I'm rocking BRAW 4.6K at 12:1 all day. According to Cinedy's charts, the readout on the 4.6K G2 and full 4.6K B-RAW is just under 8 seconds, so we know the processor in this thing screams. Total patch range for dynamic range in 4.6K B-RAW is about 14.8 stops, with a signal-to-noise ratio of 1 at 13.2 and a signal-to-noise ratio of 2 at 12.1. That's some serious firepower for technical specs, but allow me to get a tad more subjective and talk about the color science for a second. This is one of my standard talking head shots. I have a booklight over here to the left going through a 6x6 full grid, and then probably some other light over here doing, looks like I have some gobo work going on here. Not super important. I'm going to start off by grabbing the sauce, which is my standard power grade I always start with. I'm going to go up here to my first CST and make sure that this is Blackmagic Gen 4 and 5 and Blackmagic Film Gen 5. And then we'll need to change it to Gen 5 down here in the raw tab. So I'll change it from 4 to 5. All my grades are turned off right now for some reason. So I'll do Shift D to turn them back on, toggle them. And for now, I'm going to turn off film emulation, texture, and density so we can see what's going on here. I might bump this down to 500. Let's do 640. This is kind of a high-key, healthy, sunny kind of look. Color science right out of the gate is really amazing, but it also takes grades really well. This is all recorded in Blackmagic RAW 12:1, so it's actually the most compressed version of this. And I will go in and I will turn film emulation on, and I'll turn my density node on at the same time. Maybe we add a little bit of texture work and a little bit of grain. I do have a video on how to set up this node tree if you guys are interested. I'll link it. I'll grab all 4 of the adjustments that we just made. We can go full screen, and then I'll toggle them on and off. And it's just, nothing's breaking. Nothing looks weird. For a regular talking headshot like this, I would turn my film emulation down to like 0.2, 0.3 maybe. It's taking the grade really well. I love what it looks like with just the CSTs, but it's taking the additional film emulation and density adjustments really, really well. I love the skin tones coming out of this. Again, I think learning how to use all the different manufacturers' log curves is really, really important, and not to just practice one of them, but if I had to pick my favorite out of all of them, it would be Blackmagic Film for sure. Option 1 to load the grade into slot number 1, and then we'll move on to our second shot, Command 1, and that'll just paste everything that we did to this last shot. So I'll actually turn the texture node off, so that's not affecting anything. I'll turn grain off, and then I'm actually going to bump this up a little bit to like 1250. Just for funsies, we'll grab emulation and density so you can see what those are doing. I'll toggle them on and off. Just kind of turning the greens a little bit less yellow and then a little bit more towards like blue, a little bit truer green, smoothing everything out a little bit. I'll go ahead and turn them off. There's definitely some texture and noise here, and I really, really love this noise pattern. There is a little bit of fixed pattern noise if you push it really hard up at 3200. This is a little bit underexposed, so there is some texture in the shot, but the noise pattern is just beautiful. I would leave this in. I think it makes the shot look a little bit more organic, but what about a shot that's really, really underexposed? Grab this grade, put it on this one. I think what I'm going to do is bump this all the way up to 3200. You can toggle on and off highlight recovery, and it does a really, really good job, but I didn't actually clip anything here, so we're going to leave it off. There's definitely a lot of noise in here. All I'm going to do is turn on film emulation. I'm going to turn on texture. I'm going to turn on density. Then I'm going to go into contrast, turn on editable splines. I'm going to bring the black point up, make a really smooth ramp, find where I want the black point to be, and then ease off a little bit. And there you go. There's a lot you can do in terms of latitude, and the sensor itself has a lot of dynamic range, but you cannot underexpose a shot at 3200 and expect to get everything back. I had to push everything down pretty hard to get a clean, smooth image here. I would say if there was any singular limitation with the URSA Mini Pro 4.6K G2 in its entirety, is that you won't be able to shoot in no light situations, which is a crazy thing to complain about because of the target market for this camera. Chances are if you're investing in a cinema camera like this, then you have access to lights. It's more of a production camera and not so much of a let's go and shoot Blair Witch Project in the sewer kind of thing. But if you need to underexpose a shot, if you need to shoot something at 3200, as long as there's plenty of information for the sensor to gather, you shouldn't have any issues. But overall, the image quality, the sharpness, the smoothness of the sensor, the color science, everything is just spectacular. I really love this thing. It perfectly complements my style of filmmaking and makes me excited to pick it up and go and shoot with it. It's certainly not for everybody, but there's a wide enough gamut of cameras out there to choose from. There's bound to be something for every filmmaker. For this point in my career, Eleanor's the one for me. Hey, thanks for watching. I'll see you soon.